Well, here we are. This is Douglas Allen Frazier. It is now the 21st of March, 2016, and this is the Douglas Allen Frazier Show. And we're going to be doing this is part 3 of a program that we have been talking about, Islam, Facts or Dreams. It comes from a speech that was given by Andrew C. McCarthy of the National Review Institute while he was speaking at Hillsdale College. And I have been reading this and sharing points for 2 previous episodes. So the little recap that we're going to go before we move forward as we move into hopefully the final segment, but we'll just see how it goes. I hope you've been getting something out of this. And I noticed today that this post also comes out on audio on YouTube. So you can look it up by the title that's posted and enjoy just the audio portion. You can share it. And my whole design is for all of us to gain an understanding of the challenges that we have in understanding a force that is great in the world today. And we must understand the force that is great in the world today so we can combat those things which are coming against the lives of people in all nations around the world, whether they be Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever. This force must be understood and stopped. And I'll put this in because I believe this is the truest of all truths, and it's something you might debate, you might not comprehend, but it cannot be denied. It is the fact that God Himself is in control. That is not Allah. It is the true and living God whose Son is Jesus Christ. As a recap, we looked at the idea that in order to understand the ideas, the concepts, the theology, and the laws of Islam, most Muslims, probably 99%, do not feel competent to share what is in the Quran or other areas of their books, the hadiths, the extra, I'll say, Quranic scriptures or theology that have been placed in other books outside of the Quran to give an understanding. They could be commentaries, I think is the best word to use. But when the blind sheikh was on trial, the author, Andrew McCarthy, had to deal with understanding where he was coming from. Where did this all start? And this is the interesting thing that he notes. He says this: now understand, there was no doubt that the blind sheikh was on trial for his attempt to blow up the World Trade Center. And there was no doubt that he was a terrorist because he bragged about it. By his own words, he spoke out and shared that he was a terrorist. But that did not disqualify him in the minds of these moderate and peaceful Muslims from rendering authoritative opinions on the meaning of the core tenets of their religion. So in other words, they were willing to listen and learn from a man that had caused great damage, if you will, to their belief structure of being a peaceful religion, because he was on trial, and as I already stated, he bragged about being a terrorist. Andrew goes on farther to state this: although this came as a revelation to me, it shouldn't have. After all, it is not as if Western civilization had no experience in dealing with Islamic supremacists. This was the Islamist ideology that we speak of today. This belief was of the Sharia law that is stated, this must govern society. This is the governing law of Islam. So I already mentioned that Winston Churchill himself had several different occasions to deal with Muslims during his lifetime. One as a soldier, the other as being the prime minister. Now this is a quote from Winston Churchill, where he states, "How dreadful are the curses which Mohammedanism lays on its followers. Besides the fanatical frenzy, which is as dangerous in a man as hydrophobia in a dog, there is this fearful, fatalistic apathy." Listen to that again. There is this fearful, fatalistic apathy. Improvident habits, slovenly systems of agriculture, sluggish methods of commerce, and insecurity of property exist wherever the followers of the Prophet rule or live. I would look at this from a modern standpoint. There'll be Islamic apologists who will say, well, that's not a correct statement. I would counter with this argument. If it's not an accurate statement, then why are so many Muslims moving out of their home countries and attempting to gain entry into the West, into Europe, into the United States, into Canada? If there was not these great challenges in those home nations where Islam is the order of the day, the religion of the nation, then why are all these people living and trying to go to another nation and not truly attempting to blend in and accept the rules of the society of that nation, but to bring their own rules, especially Sharia law, with them? That is a question that must be answered. A degraded sensualism deprives this life of its grace and refinement, the next of its dignity and its sanctity. The fact that in Mohammedan law, every woman must belong to some man as his absolute property, either as a wife, a child, or a concubine. This must delay the final extinction of slavery and look around the world today. There are forms of slavery in many nations that are Muslim nations where slavery is a part of what is going on. Look at the imposed slavery of ISIS and what they expect their caliphate to look like, and how they have imposed slaves that serve them, whether they are working slaves or sexual slaves or child slaves. I would suggest also that we must also distinguish between Islam and Muslims. It's very important to do this, but I also have a personal reason. Thus says Andrew McCarthy. It says, when I began working with the national security cases, the Muslims I first encountered were not terrorists. To the contrary, they were pro-American patriots who helped us infiltrate terror cells, disrupt mass murder plots, and gather the evidence we needed to convict the jihadists. And I recognize, even as I make this recording, that there are other Muslims who have served this nation well in many areas of our national system within the United States of America, within other nations around the world. So let it be known that there are Muslims that are peaceful. But let's look at also another comment where Churchill makes this comment, because he also appreciated the fact that there were Muslims in England, and he stressed it. He said there are individual Muslims that show splendid qualities. Thousands have become the brave and loyal soldiers of the Queen. The problem was not the people, he concluded, it was the doctrine. And I would also conclude with this as a statement: this has been the underwriting question ever since 9/11 of many of the more conservative news broadcasters. They have stated, why won't Muslims come forward and denounce those things that they believe that go against what they believe their faith is supposed to be all about. Now, it looks like this broadcast is going to go on for another session, but we're going to move a little bit farther down, and let's look at Islamic law, Sharia law. On this topic, it's useful to turn to a man named of Robert Jackson. He is a well-known figure within the American law and politics. Historically, he was President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Attorney General. He was a Justice of the Supreme Court, and he was a Chief Prosecutor of the war crimes trials at Nuremberg. So this man knows law and international law. It's said that in 1955, Justice Jackson penned the foreword to a book called Law in the Middle East. And unlike today's government officials, Justice Jackson thought Sharia was a subject worthy of close study. And this has been a part of all of the information I've shared so far in talking about the facts and the dreams of Islam as we see in many cases of our political figures here in the United States. They don't want to bring it up. They don't want to make it a point of study. They want to just leave it alone and make up their own excuses about what is really going on or what is really enclosed within Sharia law. Now, I'm going to close with what Justice Jackson thought about and wrote about when he considered Sharia law. In any broad sense, Islamic law offers the American lawyer a study in dramatic contrasts. He's looking at it from a legal position. Remember, he's a Supreme Court justice. Even casual observers and superficial knowledge, all that must be looked at from a different standpoint for those that serve at the bench or the bar. And it reveals that its striking features relative to our law, talking about Western law or law in the United States, are not likenesses, but inconsistencies. Not similarities, but contrary. In other words, they're contrary. They're contrary. They're not that similar at all. They also have to look at its source, its scope, its sanctions. The law of the Middle East is the antithesis of Western law. So let's leave it at that right there. The laws of the Middle East, talking of Sharia law, because that is the law of the Middle East except one country, Israel. There's only one country that you can speak of in the Middle East that does not go by Sharia law, and that is Israel. But all the rest use Sharia law as the basis of their legal system and as the backing of their society and the control of their society. And Justice Jackson says they are completely opposites of Western law and Western civilization. So let's leave it for there. For this evening, we will move forward tomorrow. There's more to go. I hope you will come back. This has been an interesting study. There's more to learn. And like I said in the beginning, this is important for us to share. It's important for us to understand. It's important to share with our children. It's important to share with our educators. It's important to share with our media. It's important to share with all of those who make any sort of a political decision when it comes to how do we look at the Muslim, the Islamic situation, not only in the United States, but in the world. This is Douglas Frazier, signing out from the Douglas Allen Frazier Show.